Nehemiah chapter 13. We are going to finish up Nehemiah this week. All in all, I have enjoyed teaching out of the book of Nehemiah. I've read Nehemiah through 2 or 3 times, but I've never actually sat down and studied it until I felt like I needed to teach it. But I hope you guys have enjoyed reading Nehemiah as much as I enjoyed teaching it. But that's just a side note for you there. But Nehemiah chapter 13. Last week we looked at the dedication of the temple, how they went about doing that, what took place ceremonial-wise with the priests and the Levites and all that sort of stuff. This chapter, I'm not exactly sure how much time has passed between chapter 12 and chapter 13, but this is a different time period of what Nehemiah is writing here. And you would think with the past couple of chapters, everything has gone great, everything's gone good with Nehemiah and the people, but something has happened over time. Something's kind of stepped in. We are going to try to read all the verses this week anyway, just kind of wrap up everything. But Nehemiah 13, in verse number 1, and it says, "On that day they read in the book of Moses in the audience of the people, and therein was found written in the Ammonite and the Moabite should not come into the congregation of God forever, because they met not the children of Israel with bread and with water, but hired Balaam against them, and he should curse them. Howbeit our God turned the curse into a blessing. Now it came to pass when they had heard the law that they separated from Israel all the mixed multitude. And before this, Eliashib the priest, having the oversight of the chamber of the housing of our God, was allied unto Tobiah." Okay, so we've got here they've reread the book of Moses, the law, and they read these certain people, the Ammonites and the Moabites, should not be in the congregation of God's people. Now, if you go back to chapter 4, I believe we see here again Tobiah. If you remember right, Tobiah was the enemy. He was not, if I'm not mistaken, he said he mocked the wall. He said that even a fox could climb up and get over it, saying the wall was so weak. We've seen that in chapter 12. That was not so, because how many people was actually on top of the wall, standing and walking around on the wall. But here we have, I believe he was a Ammonite, I believe, anyway. But he was not supposed to be in the congregation. So verse number 5. "And he had prepared for him a great chamber, where aforetime they laid the meat offerings and frankincense and the vessels and the tithes of the corn and new wine and the oil, which was commanded to be given to the Levites and the singers and the porters and the offerings of the priest. But in all this time was not I at Jerusalem, for in 30th year of
Artaxerxes.
Artaxerxes. Okay, Artaxerxes. Wow, okay. King of Babylon, came I unto the king, and after certain days obtained I leave of the king." Okay, so Nehemiah was in Jerusalem, and then we have this new priest come in, Eliashib, which is not, we're going to look at a different Eliashib later on in the chapter, but he has, if I'm not mistaken, he was kin to Tobiah, and he has set up a place in the temple for Tobiah. Now again, we looked at who was supposed to be in the temple. Tobiah was not supposed to be in there. Okay, it's the Levites and the priests were the only ones that were allowed to go into the temple. Verse number, where did I stop at? Verse number 7. "And I came to Jerusalem and understood of the evil that Eliashib did for Tobiah in preparing him a chamber in the courts of the house of God." Okay, so Nehemiah is angry, and he actually has a right to be angry, because he has set up this new beginning of Jerusalem, and here we are, things were going great. He's come back to check in, and first thing he finds is somebody is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. You go back to chapter 10 and let's see, chapter 10 and 11, we looked at the jobs that they had. Elisha was not doing his job, what he was supposed to be doing. Okay, so verse number 8, and it grieved me sore, therefore I cast forth all the household stuff of Tobiah out of the chamber. So Nehemiah is angry. Again, rightfully so. I'm going to grab you into imagination here. I can imagine Nehemiah just taking all of Tobiah's stuff and literally throwing out of the temple. He is so angry. So verse number 9, then I commanded, and they cleansed the chambers, and thither brought I again the vessels of the house of God, with the meat offering and the frankincense. And I perceived that the portions of the Levites had not been given them, for the Levites and the singers that did the work were fled everyone to his field. Again, we see here something that was set up that is not being done. The Levites were not getting their portions. The singers were not getting their portions. And you look here in chapter 12, they were supposed to be doing that. That's two things. And we're 10 verses in, and we've got two things here that things have gone the way they're not supposed to be going. Verse number 11. It says, then contended I with the rulers, and said, why is the house of God forsaken? And I gathered them together and set them in their place. All right, I'm going to look, go back to chapter, go back to chapter 10. I want you to look at something here. We see here, what did it say? It says, why is the house of God forsaken? If you remember what the covenant said in verse number 39, at the very, very last part of chapter 10, verse number 39, it says, and we will not forsake the house of God. Again, they have done that in this chapter. Nehemiah has come back and seen different things happen. They have completely forsaken their covenant to God. They promised that they would keep their jobs going, that they would keep this thing, they would do right, they would do better. And they've completely, not necessarily ignored it, but just stopped. Verse number, lost my place again. Verse number 12, and then brought all Judah the tithe of the corn and the new wine and the oil unto the treasuries. And I made treasurers over the treasuries, Shelemiah the priest, and Zadok the scribe, and of the Levites, Pedaiah, and next to them was Hanan, the son of Zachar, the son of Mattaniah, for they were counted faithful, and their office was to distribute unto their brethren. Okay, so Nehemiah has appointed some more people that were, what did he say here? They were counted faithful. Okay, verse number 14. Remember me, O my God, concerning this, and wipe not out of my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God, and for the offices thereof. In those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves and lading asses, as also wine, grapes, and figs, and all the manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. All right, so verse number 14, we see a prayer of Nehemiah. He says, remember me, O my God, concerning this, and wipe not out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God and for the offices thereof. So Nehemiah, we see his desire truly here come out and say, look, I've done good. God, don't let these people mess this up, because we have done something good here. In verse number 15, we see another thing of which the people are doing wrong. We see these people selling different things on the Sabbath day. Again, if you look back at the law, they were not supposed to do that. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was part of the covenant as well in chapter 10. That's, what is that, number 4, if I'm counting right? 4 things, and we're halfway through the chapter. Okay? Verse number 16, there dwelt men of Tyre also therein, which brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath day unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. And then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said unto them, what evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers thus, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath. And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be shut, and charged that they should not be opened till after the Sabbath. And some of my servants said at the gates that there should no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. So the merchants and sellers of all kind of ware lodged without Jerusalem once or twice. Then I testified against them, and said unto them, Why lodge ye about the wall? If ye do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time forth came they no more on the Sabbath. All right, so at this point, Nehemiah is just, he's angry. These people, again, selling on the Sabbath, not supposed to do that. So he's going to shut the walls of Jerusalem during the Sabbath at dark, so that nobody can do that. But these merchants here, like, we're going to sell them at the wall. Again, no matter where it's at, it's still on the Sabbath day. You can't do it. So Nehemiah here, it says, Then I testified against them and said unto them, Why lodge ye about the wall? If ye do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time forth came they no more on the Sabbath. And if somebody come up to me, and after they've gotten on to me, I'll give you an example. If mom told me not to do something, or she's going to whoop me for it, and I'm going to do it again, and then I get that second warning, more likely I'm not going to do that again. Simply because most of the time I didn't get a second warning, she still whooped me anyway. But that's beside the point. I probably deserved it anyway. But this is where they were. He says, don't do it, or I'm going to lay hands on you. He's going to whoop him or whatever. Just use your imagination here. Verse number 22 says, And I commanded the Levites that they should that they should cleanse themselves, and that they should come and keep the gates to sanctify the Sabbath day. Remember me, O my God, concerning this also, and spare me according to the greatness of thy mercy. In those days also saw I Jews that had married wives of Ashdod and of Ammon, and of Moab. And their children spake half in the speech of Ashdod, and could not speak in the Jews' language, but according to the language of each people. And I contended with them, and smote certain of them, and plucked off their hair, and made them swear by God, saying, Ye shall not give your daughters unto their sons, nor take their daughters unto your sons, or for yourselves. Did not Solomon king of Israel sin by these things? Yet among many nations was there no king like him, who was beloved of his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, even him did outlandish women cause to sin. Shall we then hearken unto you to do all this great evil, to transgress against our God in marrying strange wives? And one of the sons of Mark, help me out here. How do you pronounce that one? Joadiah. Okay. The son of Eliashib, the high priest, was son-in-law to Sanballat the Horonite. Therefore I chased him from me. Remember them, O my God, because they have defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and of the Levites. Thus cleansed I them from all strangers, and appointed the wards of the priest and the Levites, every one in his business. And for the wood offering at times appointed, and for the firstfruits, remember me, O my God, for good. All right, so go back to verse number 23. We find another problem in which these people have done. They have married people that they shouldn't have married. They have let these people in. Go back to the very beginning of the chapter. They let people in that they shouldn't be letting in their homes. That goes back to chapter 10 of what things that they said that they were going to do, but they didn't keep. Now, all this goes back to how Nehemiah handled this situation. He's come back after, I believe, 32 years. 32 years has passed, and he has found all these problems. But how did he handle it? He said, look, even though he's angry, and rightfully so to be angry at these people, but he came back and not scorning everybody and just leaving. He said, all right, I'm going to get on to you, but we're going to fix this. We're going to get back to where we were. and we're going to get back to the covenant that you guys signed back in chapter 10. And we're going to do this the right way. We're going to do this God's way. And we're going to try and keep the promises that you made, again, that you made to God, the covenant. Now, in my mind, I look at Nehemiah. If I've set up something that God wanted me to set up, and I believe 100% wholeheartedly that God wanted me to do that, and I've done it 100% as God wanted me to do it, and I come back and just everything is backwards and whatnot, people doing things wrong, things that they're not supposed to do, I would get a little upset. If you put yourself in Nehemiah's shoes, we should be upset, because these people made a promise. We looked at that back in chapter 10. We looked at making promises. Again, we're not going to keep all of our promises just because we are human beings, but this was a signed covenant that they had just forsaken. They had forsaken the house of God. They had let people in like Tobiah that was not supposed to be in the congregation. They've done all these things. We see Nehemiah here wants to correct the problem. Now that's kind of a big issue in today's time. We see a problem and we just get plumb upset about it and we just don't mess with it anymore. I am guilty of it. Our family kind of has a temper sometimes, a little bit, not a whole lot, but just a little bit. But we handle situations in ways that we shouldn't handle. We just get mad about it and then just run away from the problem and don't fix it. And Nehemiah here, he's angry, but he wants to fix the problem. It just goes to show you what kind of leader that Nehemiah was throughout the book. We go back in chapter 4 and chapter 5, how he held the people together as he was building the wall. And then we see here in the very last chapter that he's trying to hold everybody together, hold everybody accountable for this, and yet fix the problems that's went on. And we can look at that, we see that, but you also begin to see the mercy that God has given these people. Again, these people signed a covenant to God to make promises that they should have kept. That's just how good God is back in this time. Again, he's just as good as today as he was back then. But it just blows my mind that we see the different things that they've done. And you go back to the genealogy of the children of Israel, the mercy that he had on them. And then we see here again that they've messed up, but we see the mercy of God come into play. We see here, and I think 3 different times, we see Nehemiah pray. He said, "Don't forget my good deeds." All this, the rebuilding of Jerusalem, the rebuilding of the wall was a good thing. We have to remember that we are going to do good things, but we are also going to do bad things. We are going to mess up, but how we handle those situations is how the world sees us. What happens around us today, how we're going to handle, how we're going to look upon in recent times the stuff in Minnesota, how the Christians handle this. Just literally everything that's going on in today's time, the world's going to see how we as Christians handle this certain situation. Are we going to get angry at the world? Are we going to just ignore it and go on with our life? Are we just going to look at it and say, oh well, this is just kind of what's happened? Or we can be like Nehemiah here and say, all right, we are upset that this is happening, but we have a solution. We know how to fix this, but yet we just kind of sit there. I find myself doing that quite a bit sometimes. I see a problem, just I'll let somebody else deal with it. We see that in a lot of churches. A lot of church members, they see a problem and they don't take action. Nehemiah here was going to take action because, number one, he was going to hold them accountable for their promises that they made. And number two, he knew what was right and what they were doing was wrong. We look at today's time, we see the wrongdoing of the world, and we just kind of sit there. Why is that? I don't know, because I do the same thing. We are all guilty of it. But we need to see here, all right, we can get upset all we want. The world is not going to change a whole lot if we just sit here. But we can contribute to the changing by taking action. And we see that here with Nehemiah. Man, we have absolutely flew through this chapter, just like every other chapter. We're flying through it. But make sure I've got everything. Has anybody got anything to say? I'm going to open up the floor. You got anything, Mark?
Well, with Nehemiah, I think one notice, first of all, it's 32 years. It didn't take long for things to fall apart after Nehemiah left. You take away rule and judge, and you take away somebody that is concerned for the truth, and it don't take long for things, even in God's house, to fall apart. And this is what has happened. They have let the world come in. I mean, they let Tobiah come in. It sounded like Tobiah had him a bedroom set up in the house of God. It sounded like he made his house over there. That's what it really sounds like. And they not only let him come in, but they let him live there. And so they let the enemy literally come in. And so that was actually the first thing that Nehemiah took care of when he seen that and he cleansed that. And as you come in, notice he does ask for God's mercy because he understood why they had to rebuild the walls and rebuild the temple to start with because of Israel's sin. Prior times when they were all carried down in the land of Babylon. I mean, that's where Nehemiah come from. He was in the land of Babylon and come up out of the land of Babylon and come back to Jerusalem to rebuild that place. So he understood the situation that was at hand and seeing all this that went wrong. And it does apply to today. We can't make, I go out and preach the world and tell them do right, you need to try better, do right, and we should. But we need to tell them about Christ. We need to tell them Jesus is the one that can fix everything. But when he slips into the church house, then that's a whole different ballgame. And that's happened to a lot of churches. The world has slipped in, and this is what's going on right here. As a matter of fact, Nehemiah did get mad. If you notice, he got some righteous indignation because the Bible said right there, I believe it said he smote them and pulled their hair. And I mean, he just got right with them, man. I mean, he jumped on top of them when the beating on them, what he done. And they should have known better. And if you notice, they were even cheating the Levites and the singers out of what was rightfully theirs. And it said they'd all fled to the field. Well, they had to go make a living somehow because they were getting cheated. The people wasn't bringing what was supposed to come. So what I take from that is it didn't take long when Nehemiah left for it to all fall apart. And that's why we all have to stay very close and live and stay separated, because that was the whole problem. There was no separation. Everything just kept flooding in and flooding in, and there was no separation from the world. Even on Sabbath day, there was no separation. Nehemiah, here was something about Nehemiah. He was just concerned about making the Lord happy. What God had required out of them, that's all he wanted to do, and he seen them not doing what they needed to do. And he just, and as you say, you go back and they look at that covenant, and they had promised to do right.
I look at Nehemiah, and I kind of use this. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but I kind of compared Nehemiah to Mark as a leader. My mind went back when I first read this chapter. my mind went back to, it was last Easter when you had that, what was that, so you were sick or something. It was me and Brother Caldwell and Jeff. I felt like I was running around with my head, with a chicken with his head cut off. You know what I'm saying? That's what I felt like, because my leader wasn't there. Again, we see how important a leader was in this chapter. We see how important the leader was then. But like Mark said, it just goes to show you how close we need to be to God, even when our leader isn't there to lead us. How important it is on days it's not Sunday or Wednesday or whatever.
Well, I won't take up a lot of time, but you have to go back and look. They had appointed people before he left into their positions. You know, they put everybody. They put the priests in positions. They put the Levites in place. They put everybody where it belonged. And it's still, somebody still dropped the ball, even after that fact. There was somebody who did not take leadership.
If you go back and look in chapter 9, it says, and because of all this, we make a sure covenant and write it, and our princes, Levites, and priests, and seal unto it. Somebody, we look at our church, not our church, but the church in general, how far some churches have strayed away from God and God's Word. Somebody has messed up somewhere. We see that, again, like Mark said, we see that here in this chapter. When we looked at the certain jobs that they had set up with the priests, the Levites, the different things that was going on, somebody goofed somewhere. Like Brother Trim, somebody messed up somewhere. But that shouldn't keep us from saying, all right, this is wrong, so let's fix it. That shouldn't keep us from doing it. You see what I'm saying? All right, so I'm pretty sure I've covered everything that I need to cover. Pretty sure. Has anybody else got anything? Again, we
make covenant with God, we got saved. We're not our own anymore with all the Christ. And it's not what we want to do, like these people doing their own thing, they've done it their way. And we can't do it our way. It's not us to do it our way. We're supposed to do it God's way. And anytime we don't follow this book and try to do it our way, then we get it all with the Lord. If we see, even in churches today, folks will stand up and count. Things is going south, or you can get them back on track. It's all of our responsibility to do that, even in our own life, families, to make sure everything stays on track. And that's what the Lord requires of us. Even in the Old Testament, there was the Bible says one thing the Lord requires to do judgment. One place says to do justice and judge is better than sacrifice. In other words, it's always better to do right. That's what the Lord expects of us. Well, they just scripture on top of scripture tells us that through the New Testament that we get saved. And He gives us the ability to do that all tells us all that. We need to stand up and be accountants to it. That's the bottom line. It's like Nehemiah. I mean, he just let that go on. And the Lord, He will bring more judgment. And if we let things go on in our lives today, judgment's coming.
Right.
He's going to chastise us. Set it straight.
And we certainly are going to be held accountable for the things that we've done, the promises that we've kept, and the promises that we didn't keep. To me, that's kind of a scary thought, because there's a lot of promises that I've not kept in my life. I think I'm going to wrap things up right here. I'm pretty sure I've covered everything that I need to cover. Me personally, this is just kind of throwing it out there. I hate that Nehemiah ended this way. You know, we get 2 chapters before it ended, and everything is happy-go-lucky. We are going good, and then we ended on this note. Not necessarily the best thing in the world, but we do. As far as the chapters that we've covered in the book of Nehemiah, I find myself to where I know I need to be more like Nehemiah. Strive to do good for the church, have the desire to do God's will. And we need to kind of keep that in mind as we go on throughout our daily life and say, look, I need to do what God wants me to do and not what I want to do. You know, we get selfish sometimes, and we're all like that. But as a word of encouragement, let's not take what was going on let's not get angry about it, but let's find the solution, and the solution is in this book. It's in here. So let's take this book and give it to the world, and at least attempt to try and solve this problem, because we can't do it, but God can.